Hi guys, today we are going to be doing a Valentine's Stamp It Sunday, and we're going to be using this gorgeous hula hoop girl image from Saturated Canary. So it's a really cute little image and I just thought it'd be really sweet to colour, and we're going to be using our copics. So let's get straight on with the colouring. So I'm going to start off by doing the skin tones as usual, and I've got here my usual selection of copics for the skin, and I'm not going too dark on her skin itself, so I've just taken two actual skin tones, which is the E00 and E11 for the shading, and then I've got R20 for the blush of her cheeks, and then the E04 for her actual lips. Okay, so let's get going with our skin. Okay, so I'm going to start off by laying down a layer of the E00, and I think that it's a really nice colour, that, and that's the darker tone. So we're just going to add in where it would be a little bit of shading, so maybe, you know, under that area of her hair, and we're just going to go really lightly. Don't want anything too heavy. And then around this eye socket area here and down the edge of her nose, and again on this side. So just really, really light strokes. And then let those here around the edge of her cheeks here, under her chin, and round where her arm is, just coming forward, or shoulder really. And then we're going to go back to the paler colour, and then we're just going to go up to that colour of the darker colour, and we're going to, it looks like we're going and we're completely running it, but we're just going over it to the very edge of that line, but we're not going on it, and that will just blend that through so that it's not a hard line. And then I'm just going to again go back with this shaded colour and just add a tiny bit more, just to darken a couple of the areas. I think that just looks nice. And then I'm pretty happy, and you can see as the alcohol dissolves that the colour comes up and that shading hasn't gone away. It looks like it has, but it hasn't. Okay, and then just in this eyelid here. There we go, so pretty happy with that. So then we're going to just move down here to her hand, just her little fingers here. That's the only bit I think that's left of the skin. And again, I'm just going to lay down a colour of the pale colour, a layer of the pale colour I should say, which is our E00. And then I'm going to go in with our E11, just where the glove meets the skin there, that would potentially create a bit of shading, and then between the fingers. So we're just again doing that, and I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to go back and over colour that with the paler colour, because I think that's just fine. Okay, so then we're going to add the blush to her cheeks. So we're going to use the R20 for that, which just happens to be called blush, and we're just going to pop a bit of that colour on her cheek here, and then taking our pale skin tone, which is the E00, just taking to the edges of that blush colour. So where the line is between the blush pink and the skin tone, we're just going to take our skin tone and we're just going to gently use our pen and just go over that line, but we're not going to actually go much further in, because you don't need to do that. It's just to soften that line and stop it being hard, and just by going over that, that will do that just fine. And then I just want to add a little bit more, whoops, that's the wrong colour, a little bit more of the blush on her cheek here, and on this side too, so just on the apples of her cheek. And then I'm going to go back in with my E00 again, and just on the very edges of that pink, just feather out with my E00. I'm just going to get down the centre of her nose there. And then for her lips, I just want to use the E04 because I want to go for quite a natural colour. And I'm going to take the R20 as well, just down the middle of the lip here. So we're just going to do almost like a line of the paler colour down the centre of the lip, and then we're going to take the E04 down the edges, and that just makes it look more 3D, like a fuller, more natural lip, because it's naturally, the front of the lip is further forward, so it gets the light where it's plumper, so that would be paler than the sort of corners of your lip, which would be further back. Now we're going to do her eyes. Now I'm going to do her eyes brown, so I'm just going to take, I've got two colours here. It's a Chow, which is E47. Now it's exactly the same ink, it just happens that it's in the Chow, but the ink is the same. And then we've got E49 as our darker colour. So I'm going to take the E49 and I'm just going to go up into the very sort of under the eyelid area of her eye with the brown, this dark brown. And you can see I've just done a tiny bit. And then the same on the other side, because there's such a little bit, we can get away with doing it in one set. And then taking the paler colour, which is the E47, and then just going again, just where the end of that dark colour starts, we're just overlapping with the new colour, so it just stops it being a hard line, and then filling in where that white is with that E47. And then the same on the other side. Like so. So the next thing I want to do is her hair. So we're going to start up in this sort of parting area. So for her hair, I'm going to do her brown. Now we've got quite a few different colours here. So we've got our E49 again and the E47. And then we've got a little selection of our E50s here, so we've got E50, E53 and E55, and this will go down in order, and I've tested it out and it's a really nice combination. So we're going to start off with our E49, and again I'm using the thin end all the time of the pen. Keep the lids off when you're working, it's much quicker, and you can hold them in your other hand and swap out your pens because you don't want to be too slow. So I'm going to turn this way so that as I do my strokes, it's going to be much simpler to stroke the pen towards me than trying to flick, because I want to do like flicking motion. So we're just going to do that, and we're going to start at the roots here. I'm not doing the fringe, so the fringe is that section there, so I want to do this bit first. So just doing some flicky bits there, and also round behind this fringe area is going to be darker. So then we're going to swap out and we're going to have our E47, and then just taking that and just following the lines that have been drawn for you, really using those as your guide. So we need to go back to our E47 here because this is a ponytail, so the hair is coming up like so, so we want to make sure that we get that just nice. And then Okay, and we might not get all our colours in on this bit because it's a very small area, but it's not a problem. So now we're going to our E55, and that's just adding a little warmth. You can almost not see this colour, but it just adds a little warmth to it. And you can also see that where it's a paler colour, it then starts lifting away and moving some of the darker colours. And what I'm doing is I'm holding the pens in this hand so that I'm ready to swap them out when I need to. So now I'm going to E53. And that's going to be, this area here is definitely going to be paler, where it's on the top of her head here. And then we're going to go back to our darker colour, so we're going back to the E49, because where that's coming out of her ponytail, not here, that's going to be much darker. Just putting some flicks in. And then we're going to go to E47, because I don't want it too pale, because she is going to be a darkish brown hair, so I don't want it so pale. And flicking out from that area as well, and then going to my E55. That's in this middle area here, and you can see immediately it starts lifting some of that colour. There we go. And then my E53 to lift that area even more. I'm going to go back to my E47 and just gently add again a few more flicks in the hair. Okay, happy with that at the moment. Okay, so you can see I've turned her right round so I can get that nice flicking going on. And her fringe is coming down on here from there, so flicks out darker from there. So then we're going to go to our E55. See, we've pretty much filled in that colour and that space now, and then I'm going to go to my darkest colour, which is my E49, and add in that, which is really dark at that root area, dark around here, and obviously coming out of the little pigtail. And I'm going to go back to my E47 and start flicking that through as well. And then my E53, so that I can add in some shading and highlighting, and this will be the highlighting. There we go. So I've just laid that layer down, and then I'm going to go in with my E49 for the fringe, the roots I mean. Okay, and then I'm going to jump one, I'm going to go down to E55. What I'm trying to do is keep it a little bit paler, but not so it looks stupid, but just see with some tonal effect really. And then I'm going to go in with my E47. That should link these areas together a little bit better. Okay, pretty pleased with that. And then I'm going to go back in with the very dark colour just to add a little bit more at the root here. There we go. And again I'm going to go down with my paler colour this time just to lay a base. So this is E53. And what I'm trying to do is keep the lighter areas, but also put in where there's circular bits. You can see where it would naturally be darker, and actually I'm going to go all the way down. Because of what's been drawn, it tells you where to put your colour. So then I'm going to go back in with the E55 and just carry on down with that, so you can see where we're just putting that in where the lines dictate really where we should have darker colour. And then we're going to go in with my E47. And not forgetting, you know, this isn't blonde hair, so we want more of the browny colour because she is supposed to have brown hair, not. And you can see I'm not getting too kind of het up with what I put where. I'm just kind of flicking about. Going back now with my E55 just to blend that brown through a little bit. So I'm just using the darkest brown now in the areas that are clearly the darker areas, because the picture shows us that, because it has the most lines. And I'm just putting that dark area where the lines are really. And then I'm going to go back with my E47 over that, and that just helps blend that colour in. You know, as you go back down a shade, it helps blend that next colour in, or the previous colour in I should say. And then I'm going to go down, right down to this palest colour, and that's going to put some shading in that. And this just moves some of the dark colour out the way, so where you end up then with a more shaded effect. I'm just going to take my very pale colour here, which is the E50, and just use the sharper end, the chisel tip, just to help add, really to move some of the colour. And I'm going to then go back in with my very dark colour, the E49, and just add a few flicks to just add some texture. So now I'm going to do the other side. So again, I'm just going to go down with my E53, just putting in the colour. Okay, and then E55. So you can see where these extra lines are, that's where I'm sort of aiming my darker bits to. Just going over where the lines are really. And then E47. Okay, and then we're going to go down with our E49 to really darken up those areas, add some definition. The thing about hair is you don't need to blend it out the same way as some colours if you don't want to, because the sort of streakiness of it is what makes it work. As well. And this is E55. Okay, now I'm going to go through with my blender pen on the other side and just take some of this colour out so I can add a few streaky bits. So I'm using the pointy end. And then I can just then add in my E53 on those sort of pale edges where I just took the colour out. Or paler edges I should say, they're not pale are they? And then I can go through with my E49 and just add a few little streaky bits, just to, I'm very careful how I do it. It won't make it too dark, you'll actually see the stripy bits, which is what I'm trying to do. So just a really light touch. There we go. And then on the other side, I'm just going to go back over with E47. Just want to darken that just a little bit. And then our E55. Okay, better. And then I just want to go back on her fringe a little bit here, just to soften that just a tiny bit with those streaks, so it's just a little bit brighter than I wanted it to be, because she's meant to be a dark haired girl, not. I think that's better. There we go. I think that works better. While we're on the brown, I'm just going to do the bottom of her boots there. So I'm going to take the E47 and the E49 just to give the sole of the boots. So we're just going to put the darkest part around here and here. And then take the E47 and just blend through to the front. You can see I'm not going over the darker area, but I am just going up to those edges each time. I'm going to do the same on this side, like so. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do in the dark brown is the actual hoop. I don't know why, but I just feel like I want a wooden hoop. So I'm going to just take the darkest colour first, and I'm going to put that round like so. So where it's kind of behind her, it would be its darkest. And then down here, it would be, I'm doing it completely dark, but then it's going to come round and it's just going to be on the inside edge. Like so. And then I'm just moving it to make it easier to just be a really thin flick of dark colour around there. Coming around to here. And then taking our paler brown, if you can call it that, which is the E47, and I'm actually going to go through to the E55 possibly as well. We'll see. See how pale this looks. It's not looking a lot different, so let's just then blend through to the E55 at the top here. And don't worry too much about that hard line because I shall get rid of that in a minute. And then just taking the E47 again, just blending that last bit through so it blends through nicely. And then I want to take my E47 here. And then again the E55. Hard to believe you can get 3 colours in that little bit there, isn't it? But I think it does make a difference. I don't know if you can just catch it now. There's a couple of bits where I went over the edge, so I'm just going to go and tidy those up with my blender pen, and that should push that colour back into the right place. So I'm just taking my blender pen here. I'm going to use the pointier end. Sometimes it's easier to get more precise with that because you can kind of go right up because it's a more firmer nib. You can go right up to the edge where you want to go. Okay, so here's the colours that we're going to be using on her dress and the rest of the picture, and it's a collection of kind of pinks and reddy pinks. These are, this side is sort of more confusing insofar as this kind of obvious real pink there, but it actually works really well with that collection. And this one is a pinky red, and this is a red. This one is, so let me just run through, but when you put them together it kind of will work as a group. So we've got RV29, which is, by the name of it being RV, you know it's kind of a pinky red. But when we put it also, these two are kind of our dark colours. If you think of that as a 3, like normal a 3, we've got two kind of darker colours. And then we've got a red, which is R29, which is a real proper red. It's actually called lipstick red, so it's a real proper red. Then we've got R35, which is actually a coral, but then to kind of pinky red it up again, to keep it within that pink red range, I've put in the pale pink, or the pale red as it were, will be, for this 3, will be RV23, and that kind of keeps it in with this collection. So although it's red sort of colours, it still will blend in, and when you put the pinks and the reds together it will still work as a group because they're pinky reds rather than orangey reds. If you had orangey reds with pinks it wouldn't work. So then for our pinks, our real pink section, we've got RV04, RV02 and RV10 as the pale colour. Okay, so those are our colours that we're going to be using now. So ready to go, pens in hand, the caps off. So let's start with our heart here. So I'm going to go with my R29 to start with because I want a real reddy red for that particular heart. So we're going to go across like so, and then I'm going to go finishing off with my R35. So you can see they're kind of in that soft pinky kind of tone of red rather than orange. Okay, so we've done our heart. Now I'll worry about the string in due course. So now I need to think, you know, what I want done as what, and I'm thinking that I'd like this layer, the top layer of her dress, in the reddy colours. So I'm going to get going on that straight away with the reddy tones. So I'm going to start with my darker colours. So I'm going to start on the actual ruffles of the skirt part of the dress. So let's go behind, and you can see it's a lovely reddy pink. And then I'm going to go, oh gosh, cover myself with it. And then I'm going for my R29. That was RV20. Oh, that's funny. I got R29 and RV29. So then that, as you can see, look, when we put that through, hopefully you can see, it just reds up the pink a bit on that darker colour. So that's kind of like our darker tones. And just keeping within the folds. And I'm trying to make the back of her dress a little bit darker. I don't know why, somehow. And then we've got our R35. And then finally our RV23, which is going to be a nice sort of pale pink. But as you can see, it's very in keeping. It does work with the colours. It's not a pinky pink, it's a reddy pink. So again, just putting in some shading like so, and then we can go back and use our dark, which is, I'm going to use the red here, the lipstick colour, the R29. Just add the shading, and then we're going to our RV29. And then the R35. Okay, and then just a little bit of the RV23, which is covered. Okay. So I'm now going to go across to the other part of the dress. I'm just going to go in from here down, because if you could do that section on its own, but I kind of want it to flow down a bit. So I'm going to start with my R29. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to start with my RV23. So I want that on the front there. I'm going to do a whole layer of that colour, because particularly that front section is, you can see there's less lines, and I want it to be paler at the front there, and it's very easy to forget. There we go. So now back, I'm going to go to my RV29. So you're just looking at the folds and just kind of trying to colour in where you think it might be a bit darker. Again, like the hair, you can do this really precisely, or you can kind of just go with the flow, and you know, it's going to look pretty good whatever you do. So then we're going to go to my R35, just to bring some of this pale, so it's not quite so pale, because this is our red section of our dress, so I don't want it like too pink. And then I'm going to go over with my R29. we're just following the folds. There we go. Like so, and then I'm going to go back to my pinky toe, which is the RV23. Just go through some of these folds just to give it some lighter sections. It's just about shade and light so that you give it dimension and life, really. Okay. So it's a really nice reddy colour, and I'm just going to grab my skin tone because I've gone on her fingers here with the red, so I'm just going to grab that and just use the skin tone to push the red off the fingers because it'll just move that ink out the way. There we go. And then I'm going to grab my E55 and just go over on my hoop here to get the pink that went on there off as well. Okay, so now we need to do the top of her dress. So, well, I suppose it's this kind of tunic-y thing, isn't it, really? Okay, so we're going to grab the ready red, which is the R29, and we're going to do the strap here. And I'm just going to do little circles of colour, and then I'm going to get the R35, and I'm just going to do little circles of colour next to the one we just did, which was the R29, and then I'm going to get the RV23 and just finish with that as the last little bit there. And then we're just going to do that part behind on her back, which is going to be pretty much just in the R29 because it's just a very small amount and it's going to be the darkest part anyway. Okay, and then here we've got an underskirt section. We've got the back part there. That part is obviously behind, and then we've got the front part. So I'm going to do that back section in this darker R29 colour. And then I'm going to take the R35 just to finish that off because that's just a slightly softer red. Well, it's actually called coral, but I'm just going on numbers really for that. And let's take the R29 again and just blend that through a bit more. Go. And then we're going to do the front section, which is the same skirt, but it will be slightly less dark because it's at the front, not underneath, but not a lot. And also we've got some little folds, so we just want to go around on those folds to add a little dimension. And then I'm going to take my L35. Just follow that round again, but not filling it in completely yet. And then finally I'm going to go with my RV23 and just do that last little bit of that section there. There we go. And then I think I want to do her boots in red as well. So while we've got the red pens out, let's get those done. So let's grab the RV29 on that. Let's start with that colour, because we'll then highlight the darker part of it using the very dark red. Okay, and then the R35. And then lastly R23 next. And then I'm going to go back to my well, not back again, I haven't used that yet. I'm going to go to my R29. I'm going to use that to really add in some dimension on the dark, just to darken it up in areas that need darkening. And then R35. And then RV23 just for that highlighted area there in the centre of the front of the boot, just to give it again that sort of dimension, makes it look rounded, and I'm absolutely covered in red. Okay, so the pens, I find that as I slide the pens out of my hands they tend to colour on themselves. Just get some baby wipe and it'll soon clean up. Okay, so then I'm going to take my RV29, going to go around exactly the same sort of idea as we did before, but obviously minding the little bow this time. And then the R35. And then the RV23 for that highlight area there. That's a slightly bigger highlight area, and then I'm going to go back with my R29, or go in with my R29 I should say. I said back last time, didn't I? And just put some darker red in. There we go. So that's the little boots done. Obviously we haven't done the bows yet, but we'll do that when we get to the pinker tones. Okay, so moving on to the pinks now. So I've got RV04, RV02 and RV10. So I'm going to start with my darker colour, which is RV04, and just lay down some pink. And then the middle pink, which is RV02. And then the baby pale pink RV10. And I just want to do the top, I think. Yeah, no, the top's fine like that. I want to do the gloves, I think, just quite a much darker colour, so I'm not going to put in the RV10 for the glove. Okay, so I'm going to grab the RV04, so we're going to do the patch, and I'm going to grab the RV29 from before and use that as my blending colour so that it brings in some of that other tone. Okay, because it's quite a pinky red, that one, and we can make use of that, and literally just a very small amount just to help with the darkening up of that. And then going back to my RV04 and using that pretty quickly over, I'm going to go right over the top of my RV29 so that it makes it more pinky. And then I'm just going to go in with this next pale colour, which is the RV02, which is a very pretty little pink, and just go in with that. And then I'm going to go back with my RV04 again, just to add a little bit more RV02. And then we'll stop, because if you carry on layering it too much, you're going to end up with, you're going to bleed through, because you're going to, look, you can see it's much darker, that section where the colour bleeds through, which is fine, but then once it bleeds through so much, it's going to bleed outwards, so we need to be careful. So you need to let it dry if you want to do any more layers. As it happens, I don't, so we're okay. I'm going to take my RV29 and I'm going to dot the dots on the dotty part of the dress. So they're going to be that colour, like so, and then I'm going to take my RV04, and where it's darker, use that. So that will be kind of around where there's folds or where the shadow is of the dress. And then I'm going to go in with my RV02. I don't think actually now I really need the RV10 that much, because this is already quite a delicate pink that we're putting down. And then for the little ribbony bits that are coming down, I'm going to take the RV02 and then my RV10 just for the end. Like so. So it's just a very delicate little pink, and also I'm going to take the pink and use it on the ribbony bit here. There we go. So now we need to do her little socks and her little bows. So again, on the bows here, we're going to take the dots and we're going to just colour those in the RV29. And that kind of helps to bring it all together as well. There we go. And then we're going to take my RV04 and then the RV02. So I've kind of gone around the bottom part of that is in the RV04, and then a little bit around the top edge. More of the paler colour on this outside edge where it's likely to be lighter because there's nothing in its way. And then on here we're going to go for that colour, and then the paler colour on the bend, and then the RV04 down the two edges, so up there, and then here the RV04 on these parts and the bit behind, all of that one really, because that was nothing. And then just this outside section we're going to go on the slightly paler colour where it's likely to be lighter. Okay, and then on her socks I want to really go for the pink quite a lot on the socks, so I'm going to go and lay down a whole sock in pink, and then we'll add in just a little bit of a stripe using the other two colours. And I haven't really been uniform on my stripes actually, to be honest, but I just thought it was a bit of fun. So that's the socks done. Okay, so just to finish off and to just give the this little girl a bit of something to be standing on, I'm just taking our RV02 and giving that a little bit of pink around her. like so. So she's standing on a little bit of pink. And then I'm going to take a much paler RV10 and just soften those edges here. Not as pale as I thought. Okay, and then I'm going to get my blender pen because that wasn't as pale as I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to take my blender pen and just soften that up completely because that wasn't quite what I thought. There we go, and then once that's dry, that's going to look fine. Okay, so that's the drawing all finished and coloured, and I think that looks really, really pretty and kind of really valentine-y. So I've just had a thought. I want to use my blender pen to take some of the colour out up here on this little knot and on this one here, and just add some red. Now you could do that on all of them, which might be fun. So you can just see how the blender pen is removing the colour pretty much from those sections, and then I'm just going to carry on down on each one, and just very carefully, because I don't want it going outside of the lines, I'm just going to go down and remove the colour on these little knots on her hair using my blender pen. Now if I'd have thought of it beforehand, then I wouldn't have to do this bit, but it suddenly occurred to me it would look really cute if these were in red. There we go. Hopefully that's good enough. So now I'm going to get my lipstick red, and I'm just going to use the one colour, and I'm just going to go over that area. And just put in these red little bands in her hair. Okay, so there's the little red bands on her hair. I think that looks really sweet, and I think that just brings the red in now. And now that bottom section's completely dry as well, so that looks really nice. So there's our finished girl, all finished, all the colouring. So now I'm just going to go and put a card together, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so here's the completed card, and I think it looks really, really pretty. I'm really pleased with the finished result, and you can see how the colours have just settled down now, particularly around that bottom edge where the alcohol has evaporated away. And basically all I did was I took a lovely pink piece of silk cardstock, which has just got this lovely sort of sheen to it, and it's a very much a kind of, well, kind of a candy pink, I guess. And then I thought it was A4, I folded it in half, so it's just plain on the inside here. I haven't done anything on the inside yet. And then I just matted my picture up onto a red version, just a piece of the red. There's all sorts of colours in this pack that I've got of this silk card, and I matted it onto the red, a piece of the red, and then I just added some embellishments. So we've got the gorgeous little sequined hearts. Now I actually layered one on top of the other with my glue gel on that case, and then I just added into her eyes, hopefully you can see that, I added the glossy accents. I'm not sure if you're, there we go, hopefully you can just catch that. And also on the heart there, I added a little glossy accent, there we go. And then on her eyes, hopefully. So just did that, and I think that added just a little something. And then I stamped in the corner love. I put one of these lovely little crystals clusters underneath it. It kind of just fitted really well. Originally I'd put this on the flower here, but I then took it off because I remembered I wanted to use these heart buttons, so I just popped the heart button on top of the flower instead. And I just used a doily underneath that corner, put down 3 flowers, as I say, added the heart button and put a little bow on that of baker's twine, and then 3 tiny little crystal pins just in there to add that final little touch. So quite a simple finish, but I think it just looks really, really pretty. And of course the final touch, which I think really adds something, is this lovely envelope, which is just coincidence. I bought a pack of envelopes with different colours in, and I just was fortunate to find one that seems to match absolutely perfectly. So I'm really pleased with the finished result. I hope you like it as much as I do. I'd love to hear your comments, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.